Before the first scream, there was only the hammer. 3 blows in the dark. 1 to wake the stone, 1 to trouble the dead, and 1 to remind the mountain that dwarfs do not forget what has been stolen from them. Beneath the jagged teeth of the World's Edge Mountains, where the wind cuts like a flensing knife and old snow lies grey with ash, there are names spoken only with clenched jaws, names of holds drowned in blood, names of kings buried without crowns, names of halls where the lamps went out and never burned again. But one name is a wound that will not close. Karak Eight Peaks. Once, its vaults rang with song and steel. Once, its gates stood proud enough to humble empires. Now, its deep roads crawl with vermin. Its upper halls stink of goblin fires. Its treasures lie beneath filth, fungus, and gnawed bone. Every tunnel is a grave. Every stair is a battlefield. Every shadow has teeth. And still, the dwarfs come, not in shining armies, not beneath banners bright enough to shame the sun. No, this time they come as a handful of soot-blackened fools with blunt axes, wet boots, too little powder, and a claim marker heavier than hope. Clan Angrund has found a forgotten way in, a sealed shaft, a hidden descent, a stair that should not be. If they can hold it, even for a day, they will have won the first stone of a kingdom. If they fail, no song will carry their names. No priest will gather their bones. The mountain will swallow them whole, and the things below will pick their beards clean. Above them, goblins are listening. Below them, Skaven are digging. And in the dark between, an ancient oath waits to be spoken again. This is not the tale of a kingdom reclaimed. Not yet. This is the tale of one stair, one claim, one doomed descent into the guts of a murdered hold. This is the 3rd descent. Chapter 1. The Shaft That Should Not Be. The mountain bled dust when Bressa Iron Pick struck it. Her mattock rang once against common stone, twice against stubborn shale, and on the 3rd blow the whole tunnel answered with a hollow note that made every dwarf in the work gang stop breathing. It was not an echo. Echoes wandered. Echoes came back softened by distance, made foolish by empty space. This sound was clean and deep, like a hammer striking the inside of a tomb. Bressa lowered her mattock. Behind her, lanterns hissed in the damp. Sweat shone on soot-black brows. 6 Clan Angrund miners stood in the cramped prospecting tunnel, shoulders hunched beneath the low roof, beards tucked into belts to keep them from the worst of the grit. They had been working 3 days through collapsed rubble and rotten stone, following an old seam of ore that had promised iron and delivered only disappointment. Until now. Hergen Fletchbeard spat grey phlegm onto the floor. That, he said, is the sort of sound a sensible dwarf pretends he didn't hear. Bressa ignored him. She was young by the reckoning of the clan, not yet old enough for her beard braids to carry much iron, but her hands were already scarred from drills, blasting tongs, and hot rivets. She pressed one palm against the wall and felt the tremor fade through her bones. Behind this, she whispered, there's a void. There's always a void, Hergen muttered. Sometimes it's full of gold. Sometimes it's full of things with teeth. My coin says teeth. The tunnel captain, Durgan Stonebrow, shouldered past them both. His left eye was gone, hidden beneath a round patch of hammered copper. A scar split his brow and vanished into his beard like a dry riverbed. His armor had once been polished. Now it was a history of dents. He carried a lantern in one fist and a short-handled axe in the other, as if he expected the darkness to insult him. "Hit it again," he said. Bressa did. The wall sang. This time a line appeared through the grime. Not a crack. Too straight for that. She scraped at it with the edge of her tool, then with her fingers. Stone flakes came away beneath her nails. More lines emerged, fitted so carefully that centuries of dust had hidden them. A circle of ancient masonry, sealed into the living rock. A plug. No miner spoke for a long moment. Then old Brokar Grimbelch, who had lost 3 sons in tunnels claimed by goblins and one hand to a Skaven trap, made the sign of the ancestor gods over his chest. "Seal mark," he said. Bressa leaned close. Her breath stirred the dirt. Beneath the damage, beneath hammer scars and crude gouges, there were dwarf runes. Not goblin scratches, not rat claw filth. Proper work, cut by a chisel that had known its duty. Most of the inscription had been deliberately ruined. Someone had taken a spike to it. Someone who knew what the words meant. Bressa brushed away more dust. One fragment remained. "Maintenance access," she said. Her mouth went dry. "Deep stairwell." "Western underworks." Hergen swore softly. Durgan's one eye narrowed. "Say the name." No one wanted to. The mountain above them seemed to lean closer. Bressa swallowed. Karak 8 Peaks. The words changed the air. Even ruined, even lost, even crawling with green skin, Ratman, and worse, the name held weight. It was not merely a hold. It was an open wound in the memory of every Angrund dwarf, a kingdom stolen by vermin and filth, a promise unfinished, a debt so old it had become part of the bones. Durgan held the lantern higher. Firelight slid over the sealed stone. "How far?" he asked. "If the marks are true," Bressa said. "Olain Ma, 18-2. The shaft could drop into a lesser stair, maybe a service descent, maybe an old guard route, maybe a throat," Hergen said. "And us the meat." Durgan turned on him. "You afraid of a hole, Fletchbeard?" "I am afraid of quiet holes near the 8 Peaks," Hergen said. "That's called wisdom." The others grunted. None of them laughed. They returned to the surface camp before dawn. There, in a hollow between 2 ribs of black mountain stone, the Angrund outpost crouched beneath sleet and smoke. It was little more than a few tents, a shrine stone, a powder shed, and a palisade of sharpened stakes. But its fires were banked low, and its sentries watched every ridge. In these lands, a careless flame could invite arrows, a loud song could bring night goblins, a rich discovery could bring every blade in the world's edge mountains. By first light the argument had begun. The clan elder present, Rorek Deepdelve, wanted the shaft sealed until word could be carried to a larger force. 2 miners agreed. A third said they should blast the entrance and pretend they had never seen it. Hergen said nothing, which was worse than agreement. Bressa stood before them with the rubbing she had taken from the stone plug, her fingers still bleeding from the scrapework. "It is a way in," she said, "a secret way, maybe forgotten by every foe inside." "Nothing is forgotten in those halls," Rorek snapped. His beard was white and square-cut, his nose broken flat from a cave-in 40 years past. "The Grobi remember, the Thagoraki remember, the dead remember, And if they do not, then something fouler does. Durgan stood beside the shrine stone, arms folded. If we send riders, word spreads. It will go only to our own, said Rorik. Our own have tongues. Their cousins have ears. A hold drunkard hears. A trader hears. A ranger sees boot tracks. By the time we gather warriors, half the mountains will know Clan Angrund has found a door. That door may open into a pit. Aye, Durgan said. Then we will know the shape of the pit. Rorik glared at him. You would take a handful down there. I would take enough to hold the first landing. Hold? The elder barked the word. You have not seen it. I have seen enough. Durgan jabbed a thumb toward the mountain. A sealed dwarf shaft leading toward the lost halls. That is not a thing to leave cold. We go down, we mark it, we claim it. We send back word when we have stone beneath our boots and a barricade at our backs. Rorik looked to the others. This is madness. Cudrin Oathspike stepped from behind the powder sled and grinned like an axe wound. Good, said the Slayer. I was beginning to think this expedition would be dull. He was bare-armed despite the freezing sleet, his skin marked with old scars and fresh grime. His orange crest had been stiffened with fat and ash until it stood like a flame in a crypt. Across his back rested an axe with a crescent blade, its edge notched from hard use. He had been drinking since sundown and looked more awake than any of them. Rorik closed his eyes. Of course you approve. Cudrin slapped his belly. A secret stair into the 8 Peaks? Goblins, perhaps? Rats, perhaps? Ancient curses, perhaps? If that is not an invitation, Elder, what is? It is a grave. All the better. Saves me digging one. By noon, the descent party was chosen. Durgan would lead. Bressa would guide and judge the stonework. Hergen would scout. Cudrin would go where killing was thickest. Brokar came with powder charges and a stubborn refusal to die above ground. 2 shield dwarfs, Nareen and Veki, carried iron-rimmed boards and short axes. A young miner named Scalf carried coils of chain and climbing spikes, trying poorly to hide that his hands shook. They broke the plug at dusk. They did not blast it. Bressa would not allow that. Too much noise, too much risk of collapse. Instead they drilled 3 holes, set split wedges, and hammered in sequence until the ancient mortar gave with a crack like breaking teeth. The stone plug shifted inward. Cold air breathed out. It stank of wet dust, rusted iron, old smoke, and something animal. Hergen sniffed once. Teeth, he said. Durgan lifted his axe. Lanterns low, shields close, no singing. Cudrin looked wounded. 1 verse? No. They entered. Beyond the plug lay a circular shaft, wide enough for 3 dwarfs abreast, dropping steeply into blackness. A spiral of narrow steps clung to the wall, each slick with mineral sweat. Chains hung from rusted brackets. Iron hooks jutted from the stone. In places the stair had collapsed entirely, leaving gaps over a throat of dark so deep the lanterns could not find the bottom. The walls were carved with dwarf reliefs, but something had been done to them. Ancestor faces had been chipped away, beards defaced, names gouged out. Worse, some of the statues had been turned in their alcoves, so they faced the stone behind them, as if ashamed to look upon what the shaft had become. Bressa touched one ruined face, and felt anger rise hot beneath her fear. Who did this? No shortage of bastards in these mountains, Durgan said. They descended. Boots scraped. Chains clinked. Water dripped somewhere far below with the patience of a torturer. The further they went, the heavier the air grew. The mountains swallowed the sounds of the world above. Wind, sleet, the mutter of the camp. Soon there was only breathing, iron, and the endless downward curl of the stair. At the first gap, they fixed chains and crossed one by one. Below was nothing. Not darkness like night, but a full absence. A black well waiting without hunger, because hunger would have made it seem alive. Scalf crossed badly. His boot slipped on the far edge. He struck the wall chest first, lost his grip, and screamed. Durgan caught the chain. Veki caught Durgan. The links snapped tight. Scalf swung over the shaft, legs kicking, helmet lamp spinning wild circles across the stone. Something moved below. The lamp flash found pale shapes clinging to the underside of the stairs. Round bodies, long mouths, blind faces, squigs, but not the fat red cave beasts that night goblins drove before them in battle. These were shaft-borne things, pallid and stretched, their hides loose and veined, their jaws too wide for their skulls. One leapt. It came up from darkness like a thrown sack of meat and teeth. Its mouth clamped over Scarf's boot and bit through leather, sock, and toes in a single wet crunch. Scarf shrieked. Blood sprayed against the wall. "Pull!" Durgan roared. The dwarfs hauled. The squig thrashed, its blind head whipping side to side. Scarf's foot came apart inside its jaws. Toes and boot scraps rained into the shaft. The creature's claws scrabbled against his leg, tearing cloth and flesh into ribbons. Cadrin laughed and swung out onto the chain. "Cadrin, no!" Bresser shouted. The slayer ignored her. He crashed into Scalf, wrapped one arm around the dangling miner, and buried his axe in the squig's head. The blade split its skull with a sound like a pumpkin dropped on stone. Its jaw spasmed shut once more, grinding bone, then the body tore loose and vanished below. The darkness erupted. Squigs boiled from cracks in the shaft wall. 12, 2 dozen. Pale bodies hurled themselves upward and sideways, bouncing from step to step, jaws snapping at heat and noise. One struck Narin's shield hard enough to drive him backward. Another fastened onto Brokar's forearm, worrying at it like a dog with a carcass. Brokar did not scream. He set his jaw, drew a knife, and stabbed the thing repeatedly through the eye pits until black fluid pumped down his wrist. "Move!" Durgan bellowed. "To the landing." They fought downward because there was nowhere else to go. The stair became a slaughterhouse. A squig hit Veki in the chest and drove him against the wall. Its mouth opened wider than seemed possible and closed over his face. His helmet buckled. The creature's teeth punched through cheek and brow. Veki's scream became a bubbling roar inside the beast's throat. Hergen placed a crossbow bolt under its jaw and fired upward. The bolt burst through the top of its skull. Veki staggered free with half his face hanging in a red flap, one eye gone, beard soaked black. He kept his shield up. Another squig launched at Bresser. She dropped flat and felt its belly scrape over her helm. It smashed into the wall, rebounded, and came for her again. She jammed her mattock handle into its mouth. The jaws closed and splintered the wood. She rammed the broken shaft deeper, felt it punch through soft palate, and drove forward until the creature choked on it. It kicked, sprayed, spit, and blood, and died against her knees. Lantern oil spilled. Flame crawled across the steps in a blue-orange sheet. One squig caught fire and bounded screaming around the shaft, slamming into its own kind, spreading burning oil in streaks. The stink was immediate and foul. Scorched hide, hot, fat, fungal breath. Scalf, white-faced and bleeding from his ruined foot, tried to crawl after the others. A squig landed on his back. Its teeth sank into his neck and shoulder. He made a small, surprised sound, almost polite. Then it shook him so hard his spine snapped. The sound was sharp and final. Cadrin hacked the beast apart, but Scalf was already gone. Durgan reached the landing first. It was a half-moon platform jutting from the shaft wall, guarded by 2 broken pillars and a gate of green-black iron hanging from one hinge. Beyond it stretched a low passage, clogged with old debris. "Here!" he shouted. "Make them pay here!" The dwarfs formed a ragged line. Nareen and Veki locked shields despite the ruin of Veki's face. Hergen knelt between them and fired until his crossbow string snapped. Brokar hurled a small powder pot into the stair above. It burst with a flat boom that filled the shaft with smoke, stone chips, and shredded meat. Squig bodies tumbled past the landing, some dead, some still snapping as they fell. One landed atop Narin's shield and bit into the iron rim. Narin snarled and shoved it outward. Durgan stepped in and chopped down, severing both its hind legs. The creature dragged itself forward on its front claws, still trying to bite. Durgan stamped on its skull until it collapsed beneath his boot. At last, the attack broke. The remaining squigs retreated into cracks, drawn away by the smell of blood falling into the depths. Their wet snarls faded. The shaft returned to dripping silence. No one moved for several breaths. Then Veki fell. Bressa caught him before his head struck stone. He was alive, somehow. His left cheek was open to the teeth. One eye socket was a red ruin. He gripped her wrist with frightening strength. "Still got shield," he rasped. "Aye," she said, though her throat tightened. "Still got shield." Durgan stood over Scalf's body. There was not enough of the young miner's neck left to close. The blood had run between the ancient floor grooves, filling old carved lines until forgotten runes shone red. Brokar retrieved Scalf's chain. Hergen retrieved his lantern. Cadrin took nothing, only bowed his head for one moment, then spat into the shaft. "Not enough teeth," the Slayer said quietly. "Not near enough." Bressa forced herself to look away from Scalf and study the landing. There were runes above the broken gate. These had not been fully destroyed. Dust and soot hid them, but the cuts were deep. She wiped them clean with a trembling hand. The name emerged slowly beneath her fingers. The Third Descent. Durgan came to stand beside her. "Is this it?" he asked. "It's a landing," she said. "A way station, perhaps. Part of a deeper stair system. Can it be held?" She looked at the broken pillars, the hanging gate, the narrow approach, the collapsed sections above. Her heart was still hammering. Scalf's blood was cooling on the stone behind her. Veki was breathing through clenched teeth, while Brokar packed moss and cloth into his ruined face. "Yes," she said, "for a while." Durgan unslung the iron clay marker from his back. It was short and heavy, its head stamped with the device of Clan Angrund. He drove its spike into a crack in the landing floor with 3 blows of his hammer. The sound rolled down the shaft, once, twice, thrice. From far below something answered. 3 knocks, not echo, not falling stone, hammer against metal. Every dwarf froze. Then, from somewhere above them, in the black spiral, came a faint scraping sound. Hergen raised his lantern. A body slid down the steps. It bumped once against the wall, rolled over the edge of a broken stair, and dropped onto the landing with a wet slap. It was a goblin, small and crooked, its black hood torn, its yellowed teeth locked in a dead grin. Its belly had been opened from throat to groin. Bite marks covered its arms. Not squig bites, smaller, chisel-like, hundreds of them, rat teeth. Around its neck hung a crude token daubed with a crooked moon. Nobody spoke. Above them, in the dark, something giggled. Below them, the 3 knocks came again. Durgan pulled his axe free and looked from the upper stair to the lower dark. "Well," he said, voice like stone grinding shut, "now we know." The mountain breathed around them. The 3rd descent had not been waiting to be found. It had been waiting to be fought for. Chapter 2. Claimed in blood and dust. The dead goblin twitched for nearly a minute after it landed. Not with life. There was none of that left in the scrawny thing. Its throat had been chewed open so thoroughly that its head lolled on a string of gristle, and its belly had spilled across the landing in a shining heap. But some worm of nerve or malice still danced in its limbs. Its fingers scratched at the stone. Its heels drummed softly. Its jaw clicked open and shut, as though it meant to tell the dwarf something funny and had forgotten how words worked. Hergen Fletchbeard put a bolt through its skull. The twitching stopped. "Bad omen," Brokar Grimbelch muttered. Cadron Oath Spike wiped squig blood from his axe with the goblin's hood. "A goblin dropping dead at my feet? That's the closest thing I've had to good luck in years." Nobody laughed. The landing of the 3rd descent stank of smoke, spilled oil, hot blood, and the rank fungal reek of the pale squigs they had butchered on the stairs. The shaft curled above and below them in a broken spiral, disappearing into 2 different darknesses. Above, scraping, distant giggles, and the clack of crude wood against stone. Below, silence punctuated by those 3 measured knocks. "Hammer on metal," answering Durgan's claim. The old tunnel captain stood beside the Angrund marker he had driven into the cracked floor. Its iron head glimmered in the lantern light. The runes upon it seemed too clean for the place, too proud. Around it, Skalf's blood had dried in black tributaries through the grooves of ancient masonry. Durgan stared down the lower stair with his one hard eye. "Barricade," he said. That was all. The words struck them like a commandment. They moved. Pain and exhaustion were luxuries for safer halls. Nareen and Brokar dragged the dead squigs into a heap across the upper approach, their pale bodies heavy and rubbery, jaws still working when touched. Hergen scavenged bolts from the slain things and the goblin corpse, testing each shaft with quick, cynical fingers. Bresser Ironpick went to the broken gate and studied its hinge, its locking socket, the runnels in the floor where old defensive plates had once slid into place. Vecchi should have been dead. Half his face had been torn open in the squig fight. Brokar had packed the wound with moss, cloth, and powdered stone root until the bleeding slowed, then wrapped the dwarf's head in bandages so tight his remaining eye bulged. Yet Vecchi stood with shield in hand, swaying, breathing wetly through clenched teeth. "Sit," Bresser told him. He looked at her as if she had suggested he shave. My shield's not tired. Your head is. Then I'll let the shield think for me. Durgan pointed to the pillars flanking the landing. Shields there, powder behind them. Bressa, tell me what this gate can do. She ran her palm over the green-black iron. It had been forged by dwarfs, but age and damp had swollen its joints. The hinge pin had warped. One bar was snapped clean through. Goblin scratches marked the lower half. Something had gnawed the upper. It can slow something stupid, she said, not stop it. Goblins are stupid. Goblins are also small. Irritating habit. She crouched by the floor grooves. Beneath centuries of grit, she found a line of old brass teeth, part of a mechanism set beneath the stone. Her heartbeat quickened, despite the ache in her arms. There were drop bars here once. Maybe a portcullis. Maybe two. The landing was built as a choke point. Can you wake it? Not quickly. Then wake what you can. Above them, something clanged. A little bell. Then another. Then a chorus of them. Faint and mocking. Ringing from the upper stair. The sound pattered down the shaft, like broken laughter. Hergen looked up. Groby. A voice drifted from the darkness above, high and wet and full of wicked delight. Stunties, little beardy stumpers, we knows you're down there. Cadrin's grin returned. Oh, good. Another voice shushed the first. A slap cracked. Then a third voice, deeper and nasal, called down. Oi, you lot got shinies? Mushrooms? Dead mates? We'll take 'em all. Come up nice and quiet, and Gitstab won't skin your noses. Hergen raised his crossbow. That must be Gitstab. Sounds charming, Bressa said. Durgan motioned everyone into place. The first goblin came down badly. It crept along the outer edge of the stair, wrapped in a ragged black hood, eyes like yellow pinpricks. It held a hooked knife in one hand and a net in the other. It had painted its face with white fungus paste in the crude shape of a skull. It was trying to be quiet. The bells tied to its belt ruined the effect. Hergen shot it through the throat. The bolt struck with a meaty thunk, punched clean through, and pinned the goblin to the wall by its neck. Its feet kicked over empty air. The bells jingled madly as it strangled. For a heartbeat, all was still. Then the upper stair exploded with shrieks. Goblins poured down in a tumbling black wave. They came with shields made from barrel lids, helmets stolen from dead dwarfs, cleavers, spears, jagged knives, nets weighted with hooks, and sacks that writhed with unpleasant life. They did not charge like men or dwarfs. They bounced, scrambled, shoved, bit, and fell over one another, their courage swelling only because there were more bodies behind them than in front. "Hold!" Durgan roared. The first net landed over Narin's shield. Hooks bit into the rim. 3 goblins hauled, trying to drag it down. Narin braced his boots and yanked back so hard one goblin flew face first into the barricade of dead squigs. Its head vanished into a slack, pale mouth. The squig was dead, but its teeth were not forgiving. The goblin came away with half its face peeled off, squealing through exposed gums. Vecchi stepped forward and drove his axe into another goblin's shoulder. The blade stuck. The goblin shrieked and clawed at him, knife scraping sparks from Vecchi's mail. Vecchi put his shield against the creature's chest and shoved it backward off the stair. Its scream dropped into the shaft, thinning until it was gone. Then the sacks burst. Cave vermin spilled out in a black chitinous flood. Finger-long beetles, blind centipedes, white spiders fat as fists. They scattered through the squig carcasses and over dwarf boots, biting wherever they found flesh. Brokar bellowed as beetles crawled up his trouser leg. He snatched one out and crushed it between his teeth in a spray of bitter ichor. "Use fire!" Bressa shouted. "Kadrin already had!" The slayer seized a lantern, smashed it against the stair, and kicked burning oil into the swarm. Flame ran upward in a bright, hungry tongue. Vermin popped and curled. Goblins screamed as their robes caught. One became a flailing torch, arms windmilling, until Kadrin caught it by the throat and used it to bludgeon two more. "Come on, then!" he howled, his crest burning at the tips. "Come and get warm." Gitstab Moonspit appeared halfway up the stair, standing on the shoulders of two larger goblins as though they were a throne. He was lean and long-nosed, with a crooked iron crown tied under his chin and a cloak made of stitched bat wings. In each hand he held a curved knife. His grin was wide enough to split his head. "That one's mad!" he cried. "Net I am! Net the shouty one!" 3 nets flew. Kadrin charged into them. Hooks tore into his arms and chest, one buried beneath his collarbone. Another ripped a strip from his cheek. The goblins hauling the nets cheered for exactly 2 seconds until the slayer kept coming. He dragged them down the steps behind him, boots hammering, face shining with blood and joy. The first goblin hit the landing, and Kadrin's axe split it from shoulder to groin. The second tried to run, and got caught by its own net. The third stabbed him in the thigh. Kadrin looked down at the knife, then at the goblin. "Mine's bigger." His axe took the goblin's head off. It bounced twice, still wearing an expression of deep professional concern. The dwarfs gave ground by inches, not from fear, but because bodies clogged the stair. Goblins crawled over their own dead, slipping in blood, shrieking as they were crushed beneath iron boots. Hergen fired until his fingers bled, each bolt finding an eye, a mouth, a throat. When the goblins came too close, he drew a short axe and chopped at wrists reaching past the shields. Bressa worked beside the gate, while the battle raged within arm's reach. Sparks leapt from her tools. The old mechanism fought her like a corpse reluctant to surrender its secrets. She jammed a pry bar into the floor slot and heaved. Brass teeth shifted beneath the stone with a grinding groan. A spear punched through the gap between Narin and Veki and scraped along her ribs. She gasped, staggered, and looked down. The spearhead had cut through leather and mail, drawing a hot red line across her side. The goblin holding it giggled. Bressa grabbed the shaft, yanked the goblin off balance, and slammed her hammer down on its hand. Fingers burst under the blow. The goblin squealed. She hit it again in the face, bone flattened. One eye popped loose and dangled against its cheek. She kicked the body back into the crush and returned to the mechanism, breathing hard through her teeth. "Bressa!" Durgan shouted. "Progress! It hates me!" "Good. Hate it back." She did. The pry bar bent. Something beneath the floor snapped. A rusted drop bar fell from the ceiling with a crash, not all the way, but enough to smash 2 goblins into paste against the steps. Their bodies burst under the iron weight, spraying blood across the stair wall in a fan. The goblin attack faltered. Gidstab saw it. His grin vanished. "Back! Back, you runty lice! Not running back! Tactical back!" Kadrin hurled a severed goblin arm at him. Come down and explain the difference. Kid stabbed ducked. The arms sailed over his head into the darkness. The goblins retreated as suddenly as they had come, dragging wounded with them when convenient and stabbing them when not. The stair was left choked with bodies. Some were still alive. One goblin tried to crawl away with no legs, pulling itself through blood with both hands. Veki pinned it with his shield and stood on the board until the struggling stopped. For a while, there was only panting. Then, from below, came the squeal of metal wheels. Bressa froze. Durgan heard it too. So did Hergen. So did every dwarf who had ever learned to hate the sounds beneath the world. A chittering voice rose from the lower stair. Up, up, quiet sneak. Smell dwarf meat. Smell bloodstone. Quick, quick. Skaven. The word did not need to be spoken. It crawled through them without help. The lower darkness glowed sickly green. First came the smell. Wet fur, sour musk, rust, filth, and warpstone. Then the scratch of claws. Then the eyes, dozens of them, beady and black, reflecting lantern light from below. Clan rats climbed the stair with shields of scrap iron and stolen dwarf plate strapped across their narrow bodies. Their blades were hooked, corroded, and wet with something that smoked faintly where it dripped. At their rear, holding a jagged halberd far too large for him, came Rickett Scratchfang. He wore a cracked dwarf helm backward on his head and a breastplate hammered from mismatched plates. One ear had been bitten away. His whiskers twitched constantly, and his eyes darted with the frantic calculation of a coward who hoped to live by spending others. He looked at the dwarfs. He looked at the claim marker. He looked at the dead goblins. His lips peeled back. "Mine, mine," he hissed. Durgan stepped to the edge of the landing. His axe dripped goblin blood. "This stair is claimed." Rickett cocked his head. "Claimed? By dead things? No, no. All below belongs to Moors. All above soon belongs too. Stunties go squeal, die now." Kadrin leaned toward Durgan. "Can I answer?" "No." The Skaven charged. Not with the goblins shrieking chaos. The ratmen came in a compressed rush, shields high, blades stabbing low, driven forward by those behind them. The first rank hit the dwarfs like a sack of knives. Iron rang, rusted points, scraped over shield rims. A spear punched into Narin's thigh and came out the back. He grunted, chopped through the shaft, and kept standing. A clan rat ducked under Veki's shield and bit his wounded face. Veki made a sound no dwarf should make. The ratman's teeth sank through bandage into ruined flesh. Veki dropped his axe, seized the Skaven by both ears, and pulled. The ears tore free, but the rat clung on, chewing. Veki slammed his own face forward into the stair wall. Once, twice, the Skaven skull cracked against stone, but still its jaws worked. On the third impact, its head split. Veki staggered back, with the dead thing hanging from his cheek until Brokar ripped it loose. Bressa had never hated anything as quickly as she hated the ratmen. They stank of stolen halls, of gnawed bones, of deep betrayals committed in the dark and denied in the light. They came with dwarf coins threaded in their tails, with bits of ancestor statues tied to their armor, with runes scratched mockingly onto their shields. She hurled a powder charge into them. "Down!" The dwarfs ducked. The blast turned the lower stair white. The sound punched the breath from Bressa's lungs. When sight returned, the front rank of Skaven was gone, replaced by torn fur, shattered shields, and pieces that slapped wetly against the walls. One rat-man staggered forward with no lower jaw, tongue hanging against its chest, still trying to stab until Hergen split its skull. But more came. Always more. Rickett screamed from behind them. Push, push, kill dwarf things. Take stair, take marker. The fight became a butcher's rhythm. Shield, chop, step, blood. Shield, chop, step, blood. Durgan fought like a piece of the mountain, had learned anger. He did not waste movement. His axe broke wrists, opened throats, sheared through muzzles. A Skaven leapt at him with two blades. Durgan caught one on his bracer, let the other cut his shoulder, then head-butted the rat-man so hard its snout collapsed inward. He hooked his axe behind its knee and dragged it down. His boot crushed its chest with a crackle of ribs. Hergen ran out of bolts and began using goblin arrows, snapping them shorter and firing them from his crossbow at close range. One punched into a Skaven's eye and lodged there, feathers trembling. The rat-man spun in circles, shrieking, until it fell into the shaft. Brokar was laughing now, a low, ugly laugh. He had found a goblin cleaver in addition to his knife, and used both, carving at anything that crossed the dead line. His left sleeve was soaked red from the earlier bite, but his remaining hand worked with the fury of 3. Then the upper bells rang again. Bresser looked up. Goblins were creeping back down, not charging this time, sneaking, waiting, watching the dwarfs bleed against the Skaven, grinning at the chance to fall on their backs. Gitstab's pale painted face appeared above the broken drop bar. "Clever stunties," he whispered loudly. "Busy stunties." Durgan saw him, saw the Skaven below, saw the landing between. For the first time since they had entered the shaft, Bresser saw uncertainty in his eye. They could not hold both approaches. Not for long. Not with Veki barely standing, Narin bleeding from the leg, Scalf dead, and their powder already half spent. The third descent was not a doorway, it was a vice. "Bresser," Durgan said, without looking away from the lower stair. "Find me something useful." She backed toward the old wall beside the broken gate, hands slipping on blood-slick stone. There had to be more to the landing. Dwarf choke points were not built as simple platforms. They were machines, traps, judgments of stone and iron. Her fingers found a seam behind a cracked shield relief. Not a shield, a panel. She wedged her knife into the edge and pried. The stone cover fell away, smashing onto the floor. Behind it lay a narrow recess containing a corroded lever, a toothed wheel, and a plate engraved with a map so old the lines had nearly faded. Bresser wiped grime away, her breath caught. The engraving showed the third descent, the upper stair, the lower stair, and a side passage hidden behind the reliquary wall beyond the landing. More importantly, it showed 2 defensive mechanisms, an upper gatehouse bar and a lower flood grill, both linked through the landing, both damaged, judging by the snapped chains hanging limp inside the recess. She looked over her shoulder. Goblins above, Skaven below, dwarfs dying between them. Durgan. He split a Skaven from collar to ribs before answering. "Speak. There are controls. Upper gate, lower grill, both broken. Fix them. I can try one quickly. Maybe." "Which one?" A goblin arrow struck the wall beside her face. Stone chips cut her cheek. Below, Rickett Scratchfang shoved his own warriors forward, shrieking that the dwarf marker was his. Above, Gitstab's netters began lowering hooked ropes. Bresser stared at the old map. One mechanism could seal the upper approach. One could slow the lower. They did not have time for both. She looked at Durgan. Durgan looked at the Angrund claim marker standing amid blood, smoke, and corpses. Then the Skaven surged again, and the goblins dropped from above, and the landing of the third descent vanished beneath a fresh wave of blades. Chapter 3. The rat below, the knife, above the third descent, became a place of counting. Bressa, iron pick, counted bolts. 7 good shafts, 3 bent, 2 with goblin filth, still wet on the heads. Brokar Grimbelch counted powder. 4 charges, packed tight in waxed leather. 1 cracked clay pot of flash dust. A half sack of black grains, damp enough to make him curse under his breath every time he touched it. Hergen Fletchbeard counted enemies. Too many above, too many below, not enough dead between. Durgan Stonebrow counted dwarfs. That was the worst count. Scalf lay wrapped in his own cloak beside the broken gate, his neck ruined beyond any priest's blessing. Naren sat with his back against a pillar, both hands pressed around the hole in his thigh where a Skaven spear had gone through. His beard was grey with dust and pain sweat. Vecchi remained upright by some insult to reason, his shield planted before him, his face bound in red-black cloth that leaked whenever he breathed. His one remaining eye stared at the upper stair, as if hatred alone could hold it shut. The Angrund claim marker still stood in the middle of the landing. Everything else was blood, rubble, smoke, and teeth. Above, the goblins had withdrawn beyond the bend in the stair, but they had not gone far. Their bells tinkled in the dark. Their whispers scratched down the shaft. Now and then something small and cruel giggled, and a stone would bounce off the landing, or a dead rat would drop with a splat, or a crude arrow would come whispering out of the black to clatter against shield or stone. Below, Clan Moors had pulled back just far enough to gather breath and more bodies. The green glow of their lanterns pulsed through the gaps in the lower stair like swamp fire. Their voices rose and fell in chittering bursts. Push, push when horn squeals. No, fool meat. Wait for claw leader. Dwarf things tired. Dwarf things bleed. Marker mine. Durgan crouched over the exposed mechanism behind the broken wall panel, his axe across his knees. The old map plate gleamed faintly beneath Bressa's lantern. Its engraved lines showed the landing, the stair above, the stair below, and the hidden reliquary beyond. Little dwarfen marks indicated gates, chains, grills, counterweights, murder slots, a fortress in miniature, a corpse of one, at least. Which works? Durgan asked. Bressa's fingers were deep inside the wall, feeling around rusted teeth and snapped chain links. Her knuckles were bleeding. She had already lost 2 nails. None of it works, she said. But some of it might be bullied. Bullied is enough. The upper gate bar is jammed halfway in its channel. If I clear it, we may drop iron across the stair. Not a full seal. Enough to make goblins crawl. Good. The lower flood grill is worse. Main chain snapped. Secondary release is still connected, but the counterweight is locked somewhere below us. Can you drop it? Maybe. Hergen snorted. That means no. It means maybe, Bressa snapped. If you want certainty, ask a corpse. Cadrin Oathspike sat on a heap of dead goblins, pulling hooks from the net still tangled around his chest. Each one came free, with a wet little tear. Blood ran down his ribs and vanished into his belt. He seemed offended by the quiet. So, he said, we run upward and kill the goblins. then downward and kill the rats, then claim the stair and go home for beer." Durgan did not look at him. "Half right." The Slayer's grin broadened. "The beer, we split." That ended all muttering. Durgan pointed up the spiral stair. "The Groby have trapped the upper way. Bells, wires, fungus, pots. They are waiting for us to bleed ourselves on the rats. Then they will come down on our backs. Hergen, you know traps. Take Kadrin. Clear the upper turn. Kill whatever is clever enough to be there." Hergen looked at the Slayer, then back at Durgan. "You're giving me that?" Kadrin beamed. "He'll draw attention," Durgan said. "He draws arrows." "Same thing." Durgan turned to Bresser. "You and I go below. We find a counterweight, free the grill, and come back before the rats know why they should panic." Brokar pushed himself upright. "I'll come. You'll hold the landing. My arm still works. Your arm is bitten to the bone and you're carrying our powder. Hold the landing." Brokar's jaw worked, but he obeyed. Veki lifted his shield. "Brokar's, I hold. You sit if your knees fail," Durgan said. "My knees can ask permission first." There was no blessing, no speech, no grand oath spoken into the dark. They had already made their oath by not running. Hergen went first up the stair, moving with the miserable care of a dwarf who expected every shadow to resent him. Kadrin followed 3 steps behind, far too large, far too cheerful, his axe resting on one shoulder. The bells above went quiet. Down below, Durgan and Bresser descended past the last bodies of the Skaven assault. Their boots sank into fur, splintered wood, and slick coils of gut. One Ratman still lived, pinned beneath a fallen chunk of masonry. It reached for Bresser with 3 broken fingers, mouth opening and closing around shattered teeth. "Mercy, mercy," it hissed. Durgan crushed its skull with his boot. The head gave way like rotten fruit. "Spent it," he said. They moved on. The lower stair was narrower than the upper and fouler by far. Skaven had been at work there. Ancient dwarf stone had been chewed, cracked, hammered, and defaced. Supports had been gnawed thin. Brass pipes had been pulled from the walls and replaced with Skaven lashings of bone, wire, and stolen chain. Foul sigils had been daubed over old runes in grease and blood. The air buzzed with flies despite the cold. Bresser's lantern showed bite marks in everything, not just wood, stone, iron. The rat-men gnawed the world itself. "They've been here longer than us," she whispered. Durgan grunted. "Most vermin have. No, I mean here, in this shaft, working toward it." From below came the scrape and clank of machinery. They crouched behind a broken statue of an ancestor whose face had been chiseled away. Past the next bend, the stair opened onto a lower chamber, a circular machine room built around a suspended counterweight, a great iron block held in a cradle of chains. Beneath it, a passage had been hacked through the far wall. Skaven poured in and out of that wound, dragging planks, wheels, scrap shields, and cages of squealing rats. At the center of the chamber stood a tunneling engine. It was a blasphemy of iron and warpstone, squat and brutal, with a drill head made from stolen dwarf augers welded together around a glowing green core. Pipes coughed, black smoke, chains juddered. Its front teeth rotated in short, hungry jerks, chewing at the air. Runes had been gouged from its metal plates and replaced with Skaven scratch marks. Rickett Scratchfang paced before it, lashing workers with the flat of his halberd. "Fast, fast! Bring boomstones! Claw leader Ricket takes stair, Ricket gets praise, Ricket not get eaten!" A smaller Skaven dropped a canister. Green sparks spat from its cracked seal. Ricket shrieked, seized the offender by the throat, and shoved its head against the engine's drill. The machine caught fur first, then skin, then bone. The worker's scream became a bubbling grind as the drill dragged its face apart in spirals. Wet fragments spattered the floor. The remaining Skaven worked faster. Bressa's stomach clenched. "They're going to blow the foundations." "Aye," Durgan said. "Can you free the counterweight?" She studied the chamber. The main chain to the flood grill hung slack, severed near the ceiling, but the secondary release chain still ran through a wheel near the floor, then vanished into a rusted guide behind the Skaven engine. "Need to reach that wheel?" "Of course." "Turn it, clear the lock, then pull the release." "How long?" "With no rats?" "A few minutes." "With rats?" She looked at the chamber full of them. "Less, if they kill me quickly." Durgan's one eye gleamed. "Then don't be quick." Above, the quiet broke. A goblin screamed, then another, then Kadrin laughed. Hergen had found the first trap by watching dust move where no wind should have been. A wire stretched ankle-high across the upper stair, blackened with soot, nearly invisible. It led to a bundle of clay pots wedged in the wall. The pots bulged with fungus caps, their purple flesh pulsing faintly. He raised one hand. Kadrin stopped with his boot a finger's width from the wire. "Ah," said the Slayer. "Sneaky." "Don't move." "I wasn't. You were breathing too loudly." "That's enthusiasm." Hergen clipped the wire with 2 fingers, traced it to the pots, and smiled without warmth. "Smoke caps, maybe poison, maybe laughing spores, maybe your beard falls off and you start worshipping turnips. Can we throw them? Now you're learning." A goblin eye blinked from a crack above. Hergen shot it. The goblin fell out of its hiding place with a bolt through its socket, struck the wire on the way down, and yanked the trap loose. The fungus pots burst. Purple smoke belched across the stair. Hergen ducked behind his cloak. Kadrin charged through it. 3 goblins hiding beyond the bend had time to look surprised before the Slayer hit them. His axe took the first across the waist and opened it so violently its legs kept standing after the top half fell away. The second stabbed him in the side with a rusty knife. Kadrin headbutted it. The goblin's nose vanished into its skull with a crunch. The third turned to run, slipped on its friend's intestines, and went down shrieking. Kadrin stamped on its back until the spine broke. Hergen emerged from the smoke, coughing. Subtle. Dead is subtle. They're very quiet now. Bells rang ahead. False bells. Dozens of them. Strings stretched between stairs, across walls, through dangling bones. Goblin work everywhere. Crude, ugly, clever, in the way a disease was clever. Hergen began disarming them. Kadrin began setting off the ones Hergen missed. A weighted log swung from the darkness and struck the Slayer in the chest. The impact hurled him down 5 steps. He landed on his back, wheezed once, then sat up with a delighted cough of blood. Again. "No," Hergen said. From the shadows above came Gitstab Moonspit's voice. "Got your beardies. Come on up. Lots of fun left." Hergen looked at the maze of tripwires, swinging blades, hanging nets, and painted dwarf helmets arranged as bait along the stair. "Fun," he said. "Aye, let's share it." Below, Durgan made the first kill silently. He moved from the statue, shadow, and caught a Skaven sentry by the muzzle. His knife went under the jaw and up into the brain. The ratman kicked once. Durgan lowered it gently, which somehow made the murder worse. Bressa slipped past him toward the release wheel. A clan rat turned. Durgan threw the knife. It struck hilt deep in the creature's throat. The Skaven clutched at it, eyes bulging, trying to squeal through the steel. Durgan crossed the space and caught it before it fell. Then the engine coughed. Green light flared. Every rat in the chamber turned. For half a breath, dwarf and Skaven stared at one another. Then Rickett screamed, "Dwarf things! Kill, kill!" The chamber became teeth and panic. Durgan charged into the nearest knot of clan rats, axe low. He took the first at the knees, dropping it screaming, then reversed the swing into another's belly. Hot grey intestines spilled over his hands. A spear punched into his shoulder guard and stuck. He twisted, trapping it, and hacked the wielder's paws off at the wrists. Bressa reached the wheel and threw her weight against it. It did not move. "Come on!" she snarled. A Skaven leapt onto her back. Claws raked her face, opening 3 hot lines from temple to chin. Its jaws snapped at her ear. She drove herself backward into the wall. The ratman squealed, but clung on. She did it again. Stone cracked against bone. On the third blow, its grip loosened. She seized its tail, dragged it over her shoulder, and smashed its head against the wheel. Its skull split, greasing the metal with blood. The wheel turned an inch. Durgan was forced back against the engine. The drill head churned beside him, close enough that sparks leapt across his beard rings. A clan rat lunged. He sidestepped. The creature went face first into the rotating teeth. Its shriek lasted longer than its head did. Meat sprayed in a hot fan across Durgan's armor. Rickett pointed his halberd at Bressa. "Stop her! Stop dwarf so!" 3 storm vermin pushed through the rabble, larger than the rest, armored in blackened plates and carrying heavy blades. Bressa saw them coming and hauled harder. The wheel groaned. Something deep in the wall answered. A chain shifted. Above, Hergen had turned Gitstab's trap line into a slaughter path. He cut one rope and dropped a basket of sharpened bones onto a goblin mob climbing below. Bones punched through skulls and shoulders, pinning 3 goblins together in a squealing heap. He reversed a swing blade by jamming a shield under its counterweight, then waited until 6 goblins charged, released it, and watched the blade scythe through them at neck height. Heads bounced down the stair like thrown cabbages. Kadrin walked through the wreckage covered in cuts, laughing less now, breathing harder. Goblin arrows jutted from one arm, a hook hung from his cheek. His eyes shone. Gitstab appeared on a beam above them, silhouetted by lantern glow, arms spread theatrically. "Now the big trick!" He kicked a lever. The stair beneath Hergen collapsed. The scout dropped, caught the edge with one hand, and slammed into the stone face below. His crossbow fell into the dark. Goblins cheered. Kadrin roared and leapt across the gap, catching a hanging chain mid-air. His weight tore it from its bracket. He swung forward anyway and crashed into the goblin platform like a fired cannonball. Bodies burst around him. Gitstab shrieked and vanished upward. Hergen hauled himself back onto the ledge, fingers bleeding to the bone. He looked at the broken gap, the swinging chain, the goblin corpses, and Kadrin rising from the wreckage, with 2 goblins biting his arm. "I hate this mountain," he said, and drew his axe. Below, Bresser finally freed the lock. The release chain snapped taut. The counterweight trembled. "Durgan!" she shouted. "It's ready! Pull it!" "If I pull it from here, someone has to hold the chain until the grill falls." Durgan split a storm vermin's jaw and looked toward the mechanism. The chain ran through a guide beside the engine, then into a lower recess already filling with Skaven. To hold it meant standing inside the chamber while the mechanism completed its ancient cycle. To hold it meant staying. Bresser saw the decision form in his face. "No," she said. Durgan kicked a ratman off his axe. "Back to the landing." "But back!" He seized her by the collar and hurled her toward the stair. She stumbled, recovered, and ran, because disobedience would only make his sacrifice meaningless. But Durgan did not stay. Not yet. He snatched one of Brokar's powder charges from his belt, jammed it into the engine's exposed gear housing, and struck the fuse with his lantern flame. Rickett saw. His eyes went wide. "No, no, no!" Durgan ran. The blast caught them halfway up the stair. Heat slammed Bresser flat. The world became white noise and flying stone. Behind them, the engine screamed as its gears tore apart. Warpstone fire belched through the lower chamber. Skaven burned green from the inside, their bones visible for an instant through their flesh before they came apart. Durgan emerged from the smoke with his beard smoldering and blood pouring from one ear. "Move," he growled. They climbed. Above, Ergen and Kadrin came crashing down from the upper stair almost at the same moment, pursued by goblins with spears, bells, and murder in their moon-yellow eyes. Behind Durgan and Bresser, Skaven boiled up from the lower dark, shrieking for revenge. The landing lay between, held by Brokar Veki and Naren in a ring of corpses. Durgan understood at once. "Abandon the barricade," he roared. Brokar stared. "What?" "Fall back to the marker. Let them in." It was madness. So they did it. The dwarfs gave ground. Goblins poured down from above, howling victory. Skaven surged up from below, squealing triumph. Both saw the weakened dwarf line. Both smelled blood. Both charged for the landing at the same time. They met in the middle. The crash was beautiful. Goblin spears drove into Skaven shields. Rat blades opened goblin bellies. Nets tangled clan rats and dragged them screaming into knife work. A squighound released by the goblins leapt onto a storm vermin and tore its throat out before 3 Skaven stabbed it to death. Rickett's rats shrieked that the goblins had betrayed them. Gidstab's lads screamed that the rats were stealing their stunties. Durgan's dwarfs stood around the claim marker and killed anything that came within reach. For 10 brutal minutes, the third descent belonged to no army, no clan, no god. It belonged only to frenzy. The stair ran slick. Bodies slid into the shaft. Lanterns swung wildly overhead, painting the slaughter in gold and green. The air filled with black powder smoke, spore dust, rat musk, and the copper stink of opened veins. Then Bresser saw the reliquary wall. A section beyond a broken gate had cracked during the blast below. Behind it, old runes glimmered through the dust. She crawled to it while the battle raged, pressed both hands against the stone, and found the release hidden beneath the carved beard of a defaced ancestor. The wall opened inward. Cold, clean air breathed out. Inside was a narrow chamber, untouched by goblin paint or Skaven filth. At its center stood an oath stone, cracked but upright. Names covered it, hundreds of them. A rearguard's names. Dead defenders, dwarfs, who had once held this same stair until the mountain swallowed them. Bressa stared. Durgan came beside her, blood running down his face. "What is it?" She read the top line by lantern light, voice raw. Here stood the last of the third descent. No retreat below, no surrender above. Behind them the goblins and Skaven kept killing. Ahead the oath stone waited in silence, and somewhere deep beneath the mountain, beyond the smoke and screams and collapsing gears, Rickett Scratchfang survived long enough to send a runner into the dark. Chapter 4. One Stair for the Ancestors. The reliquary chamber had not forgotten how to be silent. Beyond the cracked wall of the third descent, beyond the shrieking goblins and the chittering Skaven and the wet chop of axe through meat, there was a small room of clean stone and dead names. Dust lay thick on the floor, undisturbed except where Bressa Ironpick's boots had dragged bloody streaks across it. The air inside tasted old, dry and cold, untouched by the reek of rat musk and fungus smoke that poisoned the landing outside. At the chamber's center stood the oath stone. It was taller than Durgan's stonebrow and twice as broad, cracked from crown to base by some ancient violence. Names covered every face of it, hundreds of names, cut deep in the old hand. Some were sharp still, others had softened with age until they seemed less carved than remembered. At the top, beneath a rune of mourning and defiance, were the words Bressa had read aloud. Here stood the last of the third descent. No retreat below, no surrender above. Durgan stared at the stone for a long moment while the battle outside snarled and hacked at itself. His armor was split at the shoulder. One side of his beard had burned down to singed wire. Blood ran from his ear and had dried in a black crust along his jaw. In the lantern glow, his copper eye patch looked like a coin laid on the face of a corpse. "They knew," Bressa said. Her voice sounded small in the reliquary. "Aye," Durgan answered. "They sealed it because they had to. Not because the stair was useless, because it mattered." Outside, something screamed in three voices at once. A goblin, a Skaven, and a dwarf. Then came the crunch of a shield hitting bone. Hergen Fletchbeard staggered into the chamber with his axe in one hand and a goblin knife buried in the meat of his upper arm. He looked at the oath stone, read only enough to understand, and spat blood onto the floor. "Lovely," he said. "A room full of dead lads, telling us to do what we were already doing." Cadron Oathspike ducked through after him, too broad for the opening and too wounded to care. Arrows stuck out of his back and thigh. A strip of scalp hung loose above one ear, where a goblin hook had torn him open. His grin was gone now, replaced by a fierce, almost reverent hunger. "Good stone," the slayer said. Brokar came last, dragging Narin by the straps of his armor. Narin was still breathing, but badly. The wound in his thigh had opened wider during the last press, and each step left a thick smear behind him. Veki remained outside at the chamber mouth, shield raised, one-eyed and half-faced, holding the gap like a nailed door. The goblins and Skaven had broken apart again. Their accidental war had burned hot and brief, but hatred was a poor substitute for discipline. The goblins had fallen back up the stair behind a screen of arrows, jeering and stabbing any wounded rat that crawled too near. The Skaven had retreated below, dragging corpses with them for meat or orders. It was hard to say which. The landing between them was heaped with bodies and steaming blood. It would not last. Bressa knew it. Durgan knew it. All of them knew it. The mountain itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the next wave. She crossed the reliquary and found what the oath stone had been guarding. A second control panel sat beneath a carved arch at the rear of the chamber. This one had survived better than the landing mechanism. It was sealed behind bronze doors marked with hammer runes. When Bressa pried them open, dust spilled out in a soft grey curtain. Inside were chains, levers, a locking wheel, a row of stone indicators carved with symbols for the upper gate, the lower grille, counterweights, flood channels, collapse charges. Her breath caught. "This is the master release." Durgan joined her. "Can it shut the stair?" "It can try." "That is not an answer. It is the only one I have." She gripped the locking wheel and turned. It resisted, then gave with a groan that shuddered through the floor. The mechanisms are damaged. The upper gate may drop clean. The lower grille may jam. The collapse charges may still be set into the old stonework. If they trigger wrong, they could bring down the landing. Hergen laughed once, dry as bone. "We're on the landing." "They could bring down more than the landing," she said. "The shaft, the side passage, all of it." Durgan looked back toward the chamber mouth. Vecchi's shield rang under a probing spear thrust. The wounded dwarf grunted, shoved, and something outside squealed as it fell. "Can we leave by the side passage?" Bressa studied the faded map carved inside the bronze door. Her finger followed a line from the reliquary chamber through a narrow venting way, up and out toward the mountainside. "There is a way. Small, old, might be blocked. Everything is blocked until it isn't." Brokar lowered Naryn against the oath stone. The wounded dwarf's face was pale beneath the grime, his lips blue. "Who works it?" Brokar asked. Bressa did not answer quickly enough. Durgan understood. The old master release was not a lever to pull and flee. It was a sequence. Chains had to be held. A locking wheel had to be kept open while the counterweights moved. A release bar had to be hammered down when the stone indicators aligned. Dwarf work, made by engineers who expected courage as part of the mechanism. "Someone stays," Durgan said. Bressa's throat tightened. "Someone stays until the cycle completes." Cadron stepped forward. "That will be me." "No," Durgan said. The Slayer's eyes narrowed. "Careful, old stone. I have been walking toward my death longer than you've been limping from yours. You are needed outside. I am needed where the dying is thickest. It will be as if summoned." By the words, a horn shrieked from below. Not a goblin horn, not a dwarf horn, a Skaven thing, made from beaten metal and bone. It sounded like a pig being opened alive. From the lower stair came a roar of clawed feet. Hergen moved to the chamber mouth and looked out. "Rats coming." Above, bells answered. Hundreds of little bells, then drums, then the crude howl of goblin throats. Groby, too. Durgan took the Angrund claim marker from the landing floor. It took both hands to wrench it free from the crack where he had driven it. Blood clung to the spike in strings. He carried it into the reliquary and planted it at the foot of the oath stone. "No," Bressa said. He ignored her. With 3 blows of his hammer, he drove the marker into the ancient floor. Iron bit stone. The sound rolled through the chamber like judgment. "This stair is claimed," Durgan said. Then the final assault struck. The goblins came first from above, because goblins always believed the first coward behind them counted as courage. They poured down the broken stair beneath ragged moon-daubed banners, eyes wide, knives high, nets spinning overhead. Gate-stab Moonspit rode atop a shield carried by 4 sweating goblins, his bat-wing cloak flapping, his iron crown crooked on his skull. "Get the stunties!" he shrieked. "Get the shiny stick! Get the room! Get all of it!" The Skaven hit from below a heartbeat later. Clan rats surged through green smoke behind shields of bone and scrap iron. Storm vermin drove them forward with halberd hafts. Somewhere behind them, Rickett Scratchfang screamed orders from safety, his voice breaking with fury and fear. "Take, take! No flee! Rickett watches! Rickett kills flea meat!" The landing vanished under bodies. Vecchi met the first goblin with his shield and smashed it so hard against the wall that its skull burst at the temple. A Skaven spear came through the mess and punched into his belly. Vecchi looked down at it, seized the shaft, and pulled the rat man toward him. Hergen stepped in and split the Skaven's face from brow to snout. Brokar hurled his last flash dust pot into the lower stair. White fire exploded. Skaven shrieked, blinded, clawing at their own smoking eyes. One stumbled into the shaft, clutching at nothing. Another ran burning into the goblins, where 3 knives stabbed it to death before their owners realized it was not a dwarf. Kadrin charged into the crossing point where goblin and rat met. He became an axe in a storm of meat. His first swing took a goblin through the ribs and kept going into the neck of a clan rat behind it. His second opened a storm vermin's belly so violently that loops of intestine spilled out and tangled around its knees. A goblin net dropped over his shoulders. He roared, grabbed the weighted cords, and hauled. 3 goblins flew toward him. One met his forehead and dropped with its face caved in. Another he bit through the nose. The third he crushed against the oath room threshold with the haft of his axe until its chest gave way. Blood covered him from crest to boots. Much of it was not his. Enough of it was. Bresser worked the master release with both hands slick on the chains. The upper indicator moved first, inching from open toward sealed. "It is dropping!" she shouted. From above came a grinding howl of ancient iron. The damaged upper gate bar began to fall. It did not drop cleanly. It came down crooked, tearing sparks from its channel, crushing goblins too stupid or too trapped to move. One was caught at the waist. The bar drove it into the stair and folded it around the iron, legs kicking above, arms clawing below, until something inside it burst. Others tried to crawl beneath. Hergen shot one through the mouth with a scavenged bolt, then took up a spear and pinned another by the spine. Gitstab saw the gate falling and leapt from his carriage shield onto a hanging chain. He swung across the gap, cloak flaring, knives out, aiming straight for Bresser at the control panel. Hergen moved to intercept him. The goblin hit him feet first. Both crashed into the reliquary wall. Gitstab was fast. All elbows, teeth, and knife points. One blade slashed Hergen's cheek open. The other punched into his side beneath the ribs. Hergen grunted, grabbed the goblin's wrist, and headbutted him. Gitstab's crown snapped. The goblin hissed and bit Hergen's ear, tearing away a piece. Hergen howled, not in pain, in outrage. "My ear, you little sack of fungus." He drove his thumb into Gitstab's eye. The goblin screamed, stabbing wildly. Hergen lifted him by the throat and slammed him onto the broken gate chain. The chain hook punched through Gitstab's back and out beneath his collarbone. He hung there kicking, one eye ruined, blood bubbling at his lips. Still, somehow, he laughed. "Still got your ear." Hergen cut the chain. Gidstab dropped into the shaft, screaming and laughing all the way down until the dark took both. Below, the Skaven brought up the broken tunneling engine's remains. Not the whole machine, just its drill core, dragged on chains by a dozen ratmen. Warp stone heart still glowing, still ticking with unstable green light. Rickett limped behind it, half his fur burned away from the earlier blast, one arm hanging useless, madness shining in his eyes. "Break, break, dwarf stair!" he shrieked. "Bury all. No one take if Rickett not take." Bresser saw the lower indicator shudder. "The grill is jammed." Durgan looked down the stair. The Skaven were trying to ram the drill core beneath the lower mechanism. If it detonated there, it might rip the whole shaft open. Kadrin saw it too. The Slayer stopped laughing. A strange calm came over him. Amid the shrieks, the bells, the grinding stone, he looked almost peaceful. "About time," he said. Durgan caught his arm. "Not yet." Kadrin looked at the old captain's hand, then at his face. "Aye," he said softly. "Now." He tore free and charged down the stair. Every dwarf saw him go. He hit the Skaven line like a falling gate. His axe smashed shields aside. A halberd took him in the shoulder, biting deep into muscle. He wrenched forward, trapping it in his own flesh, and split the wielder's skull. A clan rat leapt onto his back and stabbed him again and again between the ribs. Kadrin reached over, grabbed it by the head, and crushed it against the wall until its eyes burst. The drill core pulsed brighter. Rickett saw the Slayer coming and tried to retreat. The rats behind him blocked the way. "No, no, stop him. Stop, dead dwarf." Kadrin went through them. A spear entered his stomach and came out his back. He snapped the shaft and kept moving. A blade opened his thigh to the bone. He dropped to one knee, rose, and laughed blood through his teeth. He reached the drill core as its green light turned white at the center. Then he swung. The axe bit into the warpstone housing. Once. The blast did not sound like powder. It sounded like the mountain being struck by a god's hammer. Green fire swallowed the lower stair. Skaven vanished in silhouettes, bones flashing black against the light before flesh peeled from them in burning ribbons. The drill core folded inward, then burst outward. Stone cracked. Iron screamed. The lower flood grill, freed by the shock, slammed down with enough force to cut 3 storm vermin in half. Their upper bodies remained above the bars, claws scraping, while their legs kicked below in the smoke. Kadrin was gone. Where he had stood there was only a crater, his axe head embedded in molten metal, still glowing. For one heartbeat, every dwarf was silent. Then the chamber lurched. Bresser nearly lost the chain. Durgan caught it with her. Together they hauled, as the master release bucked and fought. The lower indicator slammed into sealed. The upper gate ground fully down. The collapse rune began to glow. "Side passage!" Bresser shouted. "Now!" Brokar lifted Nareen. Hergen took Vecchi's shield arm and dragged him bodily. Durgan stayed at the panel, one hand on the final bar. Bresser grabbed him. "Come on!" He looked at the oath stone. At the Angrund marker. At the names. Then he reached into his belt, pulled free a shard of charcoal, and rubbed it across the map plate inside the bronze door, taking a crude copy onto a strip of cloth with a speed born of desperation. He shoved it into Bresser's hands. "Carry it. Durgan, carry it." The collapse rune flared. Durgan slammed the final bar down. The third descent died behind them. Stone teeth crashed shut above. The lower stair folded inward with a roar that drowned screams by the hundred. Goblin bells became a frantic silver rain, then stopped under tons of falling rock. Skaven shrieks rose from below, thin and furious, then were crushed into silence. The landing split through its center. The oath stone cracked wider but did not fall. The Angrund marker stood at its base until dust hid it from sight. The side passage shook itself apart around the survivors. They crawled more than ran. The ventway was barely wide enough for a dwarf on hands and knees. Bressa led, dragging the copied map in her teeth, while stone dust filled her nose and eyes. Behind her came Hergen, cursing every god and ancestor by name. Brokar shoved Narin ahead of him. Veki crawled last, shield scraping over his back, leaving a red trail. Durgan came after them, only when the tunnel began to collapse. A stone block struck him across the back and drove him flat. Bressa turned, screaming his name, but he pushed himself up inch by inch, face grey, teeth red. "Move!" he rasped. They moved. The passage climbed. Air changed. It grew colder, sharper. Somewhere ahead was wind. Real wind. Not the breath of the dead mountain. Bressa punched through a screen of brittle rock with her mattock and tumbled out onto a mountainside ledge beneath a bruised dawn sky. Sleet struck her face. She laughed once, or sobbed. She could not tell which. The others spilled after her. Hergen collapsed on his back. Brokar laid Narin beside him. Veki sat with his shield across his knees and stared at nothing. Durgan emerged last, crawling from the hole like a corpse refusing burial. He rolled onto his side and looked at the mountain. Deep within Karak Eight Peaks, something groaned. Not the collapse. Not only that, a long, vast sound moved under the stone, as though the ancient hold had shifted in its sleep. Bressa clutched the blood-stained cloth map against her chest. In her other hand she held a broken fragment from the oath stone, taken without knowing when she had done it. The names carved upon it were old and sharp. Hergen opened one eye. "Did we win?" Durgan looked at the sealed mountain. His face was ash-pale. His beard was ruined. Blood soaked him from shoulder to boot. "No!" he said. He smiled then, a grim little crack in the stone of him. "We claimed one stair. Behind them, the sun rose cold over the peaks. Before them, beneath rock and ruin, the war for Karak Eight Peaks waited, patient and hungry." Bressa closed her fist around the oath stone shard until its edge cut her palm. One stair, one oath, enough to begin.